I met someone who makes me feel alive. This is over. Those were the words my boyfriend of 6 years said to me during what was supposed to be our dream vacation in Greece. The same trip where I had planned to give him a custom ring and finally ask him to stop postponing our future. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning so you understand just how badly he miscalculated what would happen next. My name is Natalie Carter. I'm 32 years old, and 6 months ago, I believed I had my life completely figured out. I'm a software engineer, the kind of person who solves problems by breaking them into steps, building clean systems, predicting outcomes. I like structure, logic, plans that actually make sense. For 6 years, my life revolved around one person, Daniel Hayes. Daniel was 30, worked in marketing, and had the kind of personality that filled a room without trying. Where I was quiet and analytical, he was expressive and spontaneous. He could talk to anyone, charm anyone, convince anyone of almost anything. And somehow, for 6 years, he had convinced me we were building something real. 6 years of shared routines. Lazy Sunday mornings where neither of us wanted to leave the bed. 6 years of inside jokes that no one else would understand. 6 years of arguing over stupid things like who finished the last yogurt or whose turn it was to take out the trash. We had a shared Netflix account, a shared grocery list, shared plans for the future. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. Or at least, that's what I believed with every fiber of my being. The trip to Greece had been my idea. I'd spent 8 months planning it, not casually planning either. I mean full Natalie Carter planning. Spreadsheets, travel forums, hotel comparisons, restaurant reservations weeks in advance. And at the center of that plan was one very specific moment. Santorini. Sunset. A small velvet box in my hand. One honest conversation about the future we had been talking around for too long. Daniel had always joked that traditional jewelry felt generic, that if he ever wore something meaningful, it should feel like it had a story behind it instead of looking like something bought from a display case. So I had a ring custom made for him, a deep sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, elegant but slightly unconventional, something that felt like us, or at least the version of us I thought existed. The first 2 days in Greece were exactly what I'd imagined, almost suspiciously perfect. We had breakfast every morning on the balcony of our hotel overlooking the Aegean Sea. The water was so intensely blue it barely looked real, like someone had turned up the saturation on the world. Daniel leaned over the railing that first morning and laughed. "This place doesn't even look like a real country," he said. "It looks like someone built it for Instagram." I smiled and handed him his coffee. "Just try not to ruin the aesthetic." We spent the afternoons wandering through whitewashed villages where bougainvillea spilled over every wall in bright pink waves. Daniel insisted on taking pictures of everything. The doors, the cats sleeping on windowsills, me pretending to look serious while holding a glass of wine that cost exactly €3 and tasted like someone had accidentally fermented grape juice. We walked along black sand beaches that burned our feet in the afternoon sun. We laughed. A lot. One night we sat on a low stone wall overlooking the harbor while Daniel tried to pronounce Greek menu items and butchered every single one of them. I remember looking at him in that moment, the wind pushing his hair back, the sunset painting the water behind him in gold and orange, and thinking very quietly to myself, this is it. This is the man I'm going to grow old with. This is the person who will be sitting next to me when we're 70, arguing about yogurt and Netflix passwords. That thought felt so certain, so solid. Like something permanent had already been decided by the universe. On the third day, something changed. At first, it was subtle enough that I almost ignored it. Daniel told me he wanted to try the morning yoga class the resort offered. Yoga? I raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. What? People evolve. You once said stretching was a scam invented by gym teachers. Maybe I've matured. I laughed and waved him off. Go find your inner peace. I'll be running along the coast. The air that morning smelled like salt and warm stone. I ran along the cliffs for almost an hour, feeling light and grateful and stupidly happy. Everything felt like it was exactly where it was supposed to be. When I came back to the hotel room, Daniel wasn't there yet. He returned almost 2 hours later. And something about him was different. Not in a dramatic way. Just something in the energy. He was glowing. But it didn't look like the peaceful, meditative glow you expect from yoga. It looked sharper than that. Electric. He was smiling down at his phone while walking through the door. The kind of smile people don't realize they're making. Private. Intimate. Good class? I asked casually. Yeah, he said quickly. Then he added, really good. He disappeared into the bathroom with his phone still in his hand. A few minutes later, it buzzed again on the counter while he was in the shower. I wasn't trying to snoop. I just glanced at the screen automatically. The name that popped up wasn't one I recognized. When Daniel came out of the bathroom, towel around his neck, I asked casually, "Who's texting you?" "Sarah from work," he said immediately. "She's having drama with her boyfriend again." But the name on the screen hadn't been Sarah, and when he noticed me looking at the phone, he casually turned it face down. I told myself I was imagining things. Travel stress. People act weird on vacation sometimes. I let it go. But the next morning, he went to yoga again, and stayed even longer. When he came back, the room smelled faintly like incense, and something else I couldn't quite identify. That night, we had dinner at a small seafood restaurant I had spent weeks researching. Hand-painted tiles on the walls, a view of the water, the owner walking between tables singing old Greek songs to the guests. Daniel barely touched his food. He pushed pieces of grilled octopus around the plate while staring out at the sea like he was somewhere else entirely. I reached across the table and took his hand. He pulled it away, not aggressively, just deliberately. "I'm just tired," he said. "The sun is draining me." When we got back to the hotel room, I tried to pull him close, thinking maybe physical closeness would reconnect whatever invisible thread felt like it was loosening between us. He turned away. "Headache," he murmured. "I think I need more water." That night I lay awake in the dark, listening to the quiet rhythm of his breathing and the faint buzz of his phone lighting up on the nightstand. Something cold started forming in my chest, like a small stone settling somewhere behind my ribs. The next evening was supposed to be the moment. The restaurant on the cliff, the sunset, the ring in my pocket. I had rehearsed what I was going to say at least 100 times. What I didn't realize was that Daniel had already written the ending to our story, and I was about to hear it. The restaurant sat on the edge of the cliff, like it had been carved directly into the rock. White stone walls, lanterns hanging from wooden beams, tables arranged carefully, so every guest could watch the sunset over the caldera. It was exactly the kind of place people traveled halfway across the world to experience. Exactly the kind of place where someone might finally ask the question both people had been avoiding about the future they kept claiming to want. I had reserved the table 6 weeks earlier. The host led us to the edge terrace just as the sky was beginning to shift into that deep golden color photographer's chase. Daniel walked beside me quietly, too quietly. Normally, he would have been joking, commenting on the view, teasing me for over-planning the evening. Instead, he just sat down and picked up the menu without really reading it. "Wine?" the waiter asked. I nodded. "Your best local bottle." The small velvet box with the sapphire ring was in my jacket pocket. I could feel it pressing against my side like a tiny weight, reminding me of the moment that was coming. My palms were already sweating. I kept wiping them discreetly on the napkin in my lap. I had planned everything. The exact sentence I would open with. The story about the first time we met. Even a backup line in case my voice cracked. Daniel poured some wine into his glass when the bottle arrived. He didn't look at me. The sun was lowering behind him, turning the sea into molten copper. I thought, wait until the light hits the water. That's the moment. That's when you do it. I reached for my jacket pocket under the table. But before my fingers even touched the box, Daniel put his wine glass down with a sharp clink. "We need to talk." Those 4 words instantly drained the warmth out of my body. I didn't know why, but suddenly the ring felt heavier, like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I nodded slowly. "Okay." He stared at the table for a second before looking up at me, and the look in his eyes was wrong. Not angry, not nervous, detached, like I was someone he had already said goodbye to. "I met someone," he said. The words landed softly, but they shattered everything. I felt my brain trying to process the sentence and failing. "What do you mean, someone?" He exhaled slowly. "The yoga instructor." For a moment, I actually thought he was joking. "You're kidding." "I'm not." His voice was calm. Too calm. "Her name is Elena." Around us, the restaurant was alive with noise. Glasses clinking. People laughing. Tourists taking pictures of the sunset. But all of it sounded distant, like I was underwater. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "I didn't expect it to happen," he said. "It just did." "After 3 yoga classes?" I asked quietly. He flinched at that. "It's not like that." "It sounds exactly like that." He rubbed his face, clearly frustrated. "You're missing the point." "Then explain it to me," I said. My voice didn't shake, which surprised even me. He looked out toward the horizon before speaking again. "With you, I exist," he said slowly. "I go through the motions. Work, dinners, routines. Everything is comfortable." Comfortable. The word felt like a slap. "But with her," he continued, "I feel alive." I stared at him. 6 years. 6 years together. And he had reduced our entire relationship to comfortable. "With Elena," he said, "every conversation feels electric. Every moment feels intense." He looked at me like he expected me to understand. like he had discovered some deep philosophical truth. "Daniel," I said slowly, "you've known this woman for 4 days." "It's not about time," he insisted. "It's about feeling." I could feel the sapphire ring burning in my pocket now, like it knew it was never going to be used. "So what are you saying?" I asked. The question came out barely above a whisper. He didn't hesitate. "I'm saying this is over." The words landed between us like broken glass. "I'm sorry," he added quickly. "I really am. I didn't plan for this to happen." That made something inside me snap. "You didn't plan it?" "No. You just accidentally fell in love with a yoga instructor on vacation?" A couple at the table next to us glanced over. Daniel lowered his voice. "I didn't say love. But it feels real," he added. "More real than anything I've felt in years." My chest felt hollow, like something essential had been scooped out of it. "So what now?" I asked. He shifted in his seat. "I already talked to Elena," he said carefully. Of course he had. "I'm going to stay at her villa for the rest of the week." The sunset reached its peak behind him, orange and gold flooding the sky. A waiter appeared at the table holding dessert menus. "Would you like to see—" "No," I said without looking at him. He disappeared instantly. Daniel reached across the table, probably trying to soften the blow. But I pulled my hand away before he could touch me. "I hope someday you understand," he said quietly. "Understand." I almost laughed. 6 years together, destroyed by 4 yoga classes and a vacation fling. He stood up slowly. "I really do care about you," he said. And then he walked away. Just like that. His sandals clicking against the stone floor. The sound faded into the noise of the restaurant. I sat there for a long time, 2 glasses of wine on the table, a basket of bread, and a $3,000 sapphire ring in my pocket that suddenly meant absolutely nothing. I sat on that balcony until the sun started to rise over the Aegean, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that felt like an insult to my misery. My phone showed 5:47 a.m. I hadn't slept a single minute. The velvet box with the sapphire ring sat on the small table beside an empty bottle of whiskey I had ordered from room service sometime during the night. I honestly couldn't remember when. My hands were shaking, partly from the alcohol, partly from the rage that was slowly replacing the shock. Daniel's suitcase was gone. He must have come back while I was sitting out there in the dark and packed his things, too cowardly to face me again. Good. I didn't want to see his face anyway. But as I sat there watching the island wake up, boats leaving the harbor, early morning joggers along the beach below, something crystallized in my mind. I wasn't going to be the pathetic person who stayed in Greece alone, wandering through romantic places we had planned to visit together, crying into overpriced cocktails. I wasn't going to give him that story. The story where he gets to say he left and I fell apart. No, I was going to do something he would never expect. Something that would shift the entire power dynamic. I pulled out my phone and started searching for flights. There was one leaving Athens in 6 hours. If I left immediately, I could make it. I booked it without hesitation. Business class. Not because I cared about comfort. Because economy was full and suddenly I didn't give a damn about money. Then I opened my laptop and started making a list. A very specific list. Not emotional thoughts. Not angry messages. Tasks. Things that needed to be done. The same way I approached every problem at work. Break the system down. Fix it piece by piece. First item. Change the locks on the apartment. The apartment in New York was technically ours in the way relationships make people speak carelessly. But legally, it was mine. The title and mortgage were in my name alone. I had paid 80% of the down payment 4 years earlier when we bought it. Daniel had been drowning in student loans at the time, so we had agreed I would cover most of it. Back then it felt like teamwork. Now it felt like foresight. Second item, contact a lawyer. Preferably someone who understood complicated breakups and property rights. Fortunately, I already knew someone. Mark Sullivan, college friend. Now a very good attorney. Third item, separate every shared account. Bank accounts, utilities, streaming services, everything. If Daniel wanted a brand new life with his yoga instructor, he could fund it himself. Fourth item, pack his things. Every shirt, every pair of shoes, every useless gadget he had insisted on buying. All of it. The list grew quickly. And the more I wrote, the calmer I felt. Like I had switched from being a victim in a story to being the person rewriting the ending. By 6:30 a.m., I had checked out of the hotel. The front desk clerk looked surprised. Leaving already? Family emergency, I said. It wasn't exactly a lie. My family had just been reduced by one person. The taxi ride to the airport was quiet. The driver tried to make small talk about how beautiful Santorini was. I just stared out the window, mentally running through my list again. When my plane landed at JFK at 2 a.m., I had been awake for almost 40 hours. But adrenaline is a powerful thing. The first thing I did after collecting my luggage was pull out my phone and search for 24-hour locksmith services. The first number answered on the third ring. Emergency lock service. I need my apartment's locks changed, I said. Tonight. There was a pause. It's 2 in the morning. I'll pay whatever the emergency rate is. The man must have heard something in my voice that made him stop asking questions. Address? He arrived at 3 a.m. A middle-aged man with tired eyes and a heavy toolbox. He examined the lock while I stood in the hallway with my suitcase. Bad breakup? He asked casually while setting up his drill. Something like that. He nodded, like he had seen this situation before, which he probably had. The drill whirred loudly as he removed the old lock. The sound echoed through the hallway. I watched the metal cylinder fall into his hand. 4 years of Daniel's access to my life reduced to a useless piece of hardware. By 4 a.m., the locksmith handed me a new set of keys. Test it. I turned the key. Smooth. Perfect. Daniel's key was now completely worthless. Keep the old ones? He asked. I shook my head. Throw them away. He dropped them into his tool bag without hesitation. After he left, I stood in the middle of the apartment. The place still looked like our home. Daniel's jacket on the chair, his running shoes near the door, a half-empty protein shake bottle on the kitchen counter. The life we had built together was still sitting exactly where we had left it. For a moment, the exhaustion hit me. But I didn't sit down. Instead, I grabbed boxes and garbage bags from the storage closet and started packing. Every single thing that belonged to Daniel went into a box. I worked methodically, like an engineer assembling a system. His clothes, folded neatly. His books stacked carefully. His gaming console wrapped in towels so it wouldn't get scratched. I didn't break anything, didn't damage anything. If Daniel ever tried to claim I had destroyed his property, I wanted zero ammunition for him. 6 hours later, the living room was full of boxes. I counted them. 15, each labeled in black marker. Daniel Hayes, belongings. Box 1 of 15. Box 2 of 15. All the way to box 15, even the framed photos of us together. I wrapped them carefully in newspaper. Not because I felt sentimental, but because precision mattered. By 9 a.m., I sat down and picked up my phone. I called Mark. He answered on the second ring. Natalie, it's early. Mark, I need legal advice. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Too calm. What happened? My boyfriend ended our 6-year relationship yesterday. Pause. While we were on vacation. Another pause. That's rough, he said quietly. I need to know exactly what my legal position is regarding the apartment and shared accounts. His voice shifted immediately into professional mode. Come to my office at 2 p.m., he said. We'll handle it. Thank you. After hanging up, there was one more call I needed to make. The hardest one. I scrolled to a contact I never expected to use like this. Robert Hayes, Daniel's father. He answered after 3 rings. Natalie? Hi, Robert. My voice softened slightly. Is everything okay? No, I said honestly. I need to tell you something about Daniel. Within 10 minutes, both Robert and Linda Hayes were on the phone. I explained what had happened in Greece. Carefully. Without exaggeration. Without anger. Just the facts. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Then Linda began to cry. Oh, Natalie, we had no idea. Robert's voice sounded heavier than I had ever heard it. What do you need from us? I packed Daniel's belongings, I said. 15 boxes. I can put them in storage or bring them to your house. I just can't keep them here. Robert didn't hesitate. Bring them here. There was a long pause. I'm sorry he did this to you. Later that afternoon, I rented a small moving van. Loading those boxes felt strangely symbolic, each one removing a piece of Daniel from my life. The drive to New Jersey was quiet. The highway blurred past in long gray lines, while my brain replayed the last 48 hours over and over. 6 years, reduced to 15 cardboard boxes. When I arrived, Robert opened the garage before I even knocked. Linda stood behind him in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. Neither of them asked unnecessary questions. They just helped me unload. Box after box. Shoes, clothes, books, electronics. Pieces of a life Daniel had walked away from without hesitation. When the van was empty, Linda hugged me. You're a good woman, she whispered. He made a terrible mistake. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. Either way, that decision wasn't mine anymore. I drove back to New York just as the sky was turning dark. When I unlocked the apartment door, the space felt different. Quieter. Lighter. Mine. Daniel's jackets were gone. His sneakers were gone. Even the air felt different without the clutter of 2 lives tangled together. I stood in the center of the living room for a long moment. Then I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because I had taken control. Daniel had left Greece believing he was the one ending the story. But by the time he came home, there would be nothing left for him to return to. The week after I returned from Greece passed in a strange kind of calm. Not the silence of heartbreak. A different kind. Structured. Controlled. Predictable. Exactly the kind of environment I function best in. I went back to work the following Monday. My coworkers had known about the trip for months. People had been excited for me. How was Greece? Someone asked in the break room. Beautiful, I said simply, which was technically true. I didn't elaborate. At the gym each morning, I ran longer than usual, letting my body burn through the leftover adrenaline still humming under my skin. At night, I sat in the apartment, my apartment, and finished separating everything that had once been shared. Bank accounts, utilities, streaming services. Daniel's name disappeared from every system one by one. Mark handled the legal side with the efficiency I expected from him. On the third day, he sent Daniel a formal letter. It stated clearly, Daniel Hayes was no longer authorized to enter the apartment. His belongings had been removed and delivered to his parents. All shared financial arrangements would be terminated within 5 business days. The letter was sent by email and certified mail. I imagined Daniel somewhere in Greece when that message arrived. Maybe by a pool. Maybe at Elena's villa. Maybe still wrapped up in the excitement of whatever dramatic vacation romance he thought he had found. He probably assumed he would come home to a long, emotional conversation. Tears, arguments, closure. Instead, he received a legal notice. And silence. For 8 days, my phone stayed completely quiet. No calls, no texts, nothing. Which meant one of 2 things. Either Daniel hadn't tried to contact me, or Mark had already intercepted everything. On day 9, my phone exploded. 17 missed calls. Dozens of text messages, all from unknown numbers. I didn't read any of them. I didn't answer. I simply blocked each number one by one. Whatever Daniel wanted to say now didn't matter. He had already said everything important in that restaurant in Santorini. Later that afternoon, my office phone rang. It was the doorman from my building. Ms. Carter? Yes? There's a man here claiming he lives in your apartment. His key isn't working. I already knew who it was. What's his name? I asked. Daniel Hayes. Of course. He says he lives there. He doesn't, I said calmly. He is not authorized to enter the building. There was a brief pause. Understood. If he causes any issues, call the police. Yes, ma'am. When I returned home that evening, the doorman handed me an envelope. He left this for you. I didn't even need to look at the handwriting. I recognized Daniel's looping script instantly. I walked upstairs, unlocked my door, stepped inside. The quiet apartment greeted me like an old friend. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter, stared at it for a moment, then dropped it directly into the trash. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Whatever explanation Daniel had written wouldn't change what happened. He had chosen someone else. That was the entire story. Later that night, Mark called. She reached out, he said. She? Elena. That caught my attention. What? Apparently Daniel asked her to contact my office after you blocked his numbers. And? Mark sighed. She claims what happened in Greece was complicated. I laughed quietly. Complicated? She says it was a brief vacation flirtation. Nothing serious. A brief flirtation? That's her version. And Daniel? He says he made a mistake. I leaned back on the couch. My guess is he wants to talk. Mark chuckled softly. He asked for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 6 years reduced to a 5-minute explanation. What did you tell him? I asked. That all communication goes through me. And? He started crying. That surprised me. Daniel wasn't someone who cried easily. He says he panicked, Mark continued. That everything felt overwhelming. That he didn't mean what he said. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I could see that restaurant again. The sunset. The calm certainty in Daniel's voice. I met someone. This is over. No hesitation. No confusion. Just clarity. He meant it, I said quietly. Mark didn't argue. So what do you want to do? He asked. I looked around the apartment. Quiet. Clean. Peaceful. Tell him no. No meeting? No conversation. Nothing. Mark was silent for a moment. Understood. 3 weeks passed. The certified letter came back signed by Daniel's mother. Everything was finalized. And I did one final thing. I changed my phone number. Because some doors don't need to stay open. Some stories don't deserve an epilogue. Or at least that's what I believed. Until the day I saw Daniel again. After the legal paperwork was finalized and my phone number was changed, life slowly settled into something that almost resembled normal. Not the same normal as before. A quieter one. A version of normal that belonged entirely to me. The first few weeks felt mechanical. I woke up early, went to the gym, went to work, came home, cooked dinner, slept. Repeat. It was the kind of rhythm I understood. Predictable systems, clean loops. My therapist, someone Mark had recommended who specialized in sudden relationship trauma, said something interesting during one of our sessions. People assume heartbreak looks dramatic, she told me. What do you mean? I asked. Crying, screaming, emotional collapse. She tilted her head slightly. But sometimes heartbreak looks like efficiency. I thought about that for a moment, because that description felt uncomfortably accurate. I wasn't falling apart. I was reorganizing. Daniel's absence slowly stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like space. More quiet in the apartment, more time in the mornings, more control over my own life. I didn't check his social media. I didn't ask mutual friends about him. In fact, after changing my phone number and blocking everything connected to him, Daniel Hayes effectively disappeared from my daily life. About a month after Greece, I went out socially again for the first time. Nothing dramatic, just dinner with a few coworkers from the engineering department. The restaurant was loud and crowded, the kind of place where conversation bounced between tables, and nobody noticed if someone got quiet for a moment. I know. That's where Ethan Walker joined our table. Ethan worked in the marketing department. Tall, calm, dry sense of humor. We had crossed paths at the office before, but never outside of work. He slid into the empty chair across from me. Mind if I sit here? Go ahead. He ordered a beer and mostly listened while the rest of the group talked about deadlines, office gossip, and a new client everyone was stressed about. At one point, someone mentioned my vacation. Santorini had been on my calendar for months. People at work had known about it. Weren't you supposed to have that big future talk in Greece? Someone asked. The table instantly went quiet. The person who asked realized their mistake immediately. Ethan glanced at me briefly, clearly trying to read the situation. It didn't work out, I said simply. No dramatic explanation. No emotional speech. Just a fact. Ethan nodded once. Well, he said casually, Greece is still a pretty great trip. That was it. No pity. No follow-up questions. Just a quiet redirect of the conversation. I appreciated that more than he probably realized. Later that evening, people started leaving in small groups. Ethan ended up walking beside me toward the subway entrance. You handled that question well, he said. I've had practice. With awkward situations? With disappointment. He studied me for a moment. You don't seem disappointed. That made me smile slightly. I was, I admitted. Just not anymore. He nodded thoughtfully. Well, he said, if you ever want to complain about terrible vacations, I know a Thai place that serves therapy-level noodles. Therapy-level noodles? Scientifically proven, he said with a completely straight face. I laughed. For the first time in weeks, it felt natural. Maybe. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I was sitting at my usual cafe 2 blocks from my apartment. Laptop open, coffee in front of me. Answering emails. The cafe had large windows facing the sidewalk. That's when I saw him. Daniel. He was walking down the street with his mother. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked thinner. His hair was unkempt. The easy confidence he used to carry everywhere seemed gone. His mother was talking while carrying several shopping bags. Daniel wasn't listening. Then he looked up, and our eyes met through the glass. The reaction on his face unfolded slowly. Recognition. Then shock. Then something desperate. Hope. He said something quickly to his mother and started walking toward the cafe entrance. For a moment, I simply watched him. Not with anger. Not even sadness. Just observation. Like watching a character from a story that had already ended. I stood up calmly, left a $20 bill on the table, and walked toward the back exit of the cafe, the one that opened onto the side street. I didn't run. I didn't rush. I simply left. Because that's what you do when something is finished. You don't reopen the conversation. You don't relive the argument. You don't give the past another stage. You just walk away. When I stepped outside into the sunlight, the air felt lighter, like closing a door that had been standing open for too long. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my phone gallery. There was still one photo of Daniel, the picture I had taken of him in Santorini, standing with the sunset behind him, smiling. I stared at it for a few seconds. Then I deleted it, and felt absolutely nothing. Deleting that photo felt quieter than I expected. No dramatic sense of closure. No rush of emotion. Just the small, ordinary motion of my thumb tapping delete and the image disappearing from the screen. 6 years reduced to a digital file being removed. Gone. Life continued. 2 months passed after Greece. Spring settled over the city, bringing that restless energy New York always gets when winter finally loosens its grip. Outdoor tables appeared outside cafes. People lingered on sidewalks longer. The city felt awake again, and slowly my life moved forward with it. Work stayed busy. I had thrown myself into a large software project that required long hours and complete focus. The kind of work where problems had clear solutions if you were patient enough to find them. The gym remained part of my daily rhythm, and therapy, which had started as damage control, gradually shifted into something deeper. During one session, my therapist asked me a question that stayed with me. What do you think Daniel was chasing in Greece? I thought about it for a long time before answering. Intensity, I said. She nodded. Intensity feels powerful, she replied. But intensity isn't the same thing as stability. That sentence stayed in my mind. because Daniel had said something very specific in that restaurant. With you, I exist. With her, I feel alive. At the time, those words had felt like a verdict. Now they just sounded immature. Intensity burns bright, but stability builds something that lasts. And stability was something I had slowly started rediscovering, sometimes in unexpected places, like dinner with Ethan. Our first actual date happened on a Thursday evening after work. Nothing elaborate, just the Thai restaurant he had mentioned outside the subway station. The place was small and crowded, filled with the smell of chili oil and lemongrass. Ethan slid into the booth across from me. I promise the noodles are legitimate medical treatment, he said. Good, I replied, because my therapist charges a lot more. He laughed. We talked about work at first, then travel, then random things like the worst movies either of us had ever seen. At no point did he ask me to retell the story of Greece. He knew the basics. Everyone at the office probably did by now. But he didn't push. That restraint felt respectful, comfortable. At one point he paused and studied me thoughtfully. Can I ask something? Sure. Do you regret going to Greece? The question caught me off guard. I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I said finally. Why not? Because if that trip hadn't happened, I paused. I might have married him. Ethan nodded slowly. That's a pretty strong argument. We walked out of the restaurant later that night into cool evening air. The pavement still reflected the city lights from rain earlier in the day. For a moment, we stood outside the subway entrance, both unsure how to end the night. Ethan shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. Well, he said, the noodles worked. Therapy level. Clinically proven. I smiled. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't dramatic. But it felt genuine. And that mattered more than intensity ever could. A few weeks later, I ran into Daniel one last time. Not by choice. I was leaving the grocery store near my building when I heard my name behind me. Natalie. I turned. Daniel stood near the curb, alone this time. He looked better than the last time I had seen him outside the cafe. But there was still something unsettled about him, like someone who had lost their direction. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he stepped closer. I just want to talk, he said. His voice sounded softer than I remembered. I know I don't deserve it, but... I'm not angry, I said calmly. That seemed to confuse him. You're not? No. He hesitated. I made a mistake, he said. I know. His shoulders tensed. You know? You already told me, I said. In that restaurant. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then stopped, because we both knew I was right. Silence stretched between us. Cars passed along the street. Someone laughed across the sidewalk. Life moving normally around a moment that once would have meant everything to me. I thought what I felt in Greece was real, he said quietly. Maybe it was. It wasn't, he admitted. It lasted 3 weeks. I nodded once. Vacation intensity usually does. He looked down at the ground. I lost everything, he said. The words hung between us. I understood what he meant. The apartment. The relationship. The life we had built together. But those losses were consequences of his own decision. Not mine. I hope you figure things out, I said. He looked up. That's it? That's it. There was nothing else to say. 6 years had already ended on a cliff in Santorini. This conversation was just an echo. I adjusted the grocery bag on my arm and stepped past him. Natalie, he said behind me. I paused briefly but didn't turn around. Yes? I'm sorry. For the first time since Greece, I believed him. But apologies belonged to the past. And I wasn't living there anymore. Take care of yourself, Daniel. Then I kept walking. No anger. No regret. Just forward. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best possible outcome. You just don't realize it until you're standing on the other side of it. Looking back at the wreckage and understanding something important. You're not trapped inside it anymore. You're free.